Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. We welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Glenn Johnson. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Magic Software Enterprises, and I'll be your host today. And our presenter, of course, is Paul Giurata, the Managing Director of Catalyst UX. We're very pleased to have Paul with us. The webinar topic for today is 9 routes that could take you into the mobile UX Bermuda Triangle and how to navigate out of them. This may be the longest title of a webinar we've ever had, so that means it's probably going to be the best webinar we've ever had. So I'm really looking forward to that. Just a brief word about Magic Software before we begin, and then we'll talk about a couple of housekeeping details and hand things over to Paul. First of all, you know that Magic Software is a global provider of application development and integration solutions, so that's why we're interested obviously in talking to you about a topic like UX design. Many of you are moving your applications from your existing desktop or rich internet applications and into mobile environments, and the design of your existing apps, the design of new mobile apps, the design of new web apps is always of interest to all of you. So we're really excited to have Paul with us today. Magic Software has been doing this for a long time, for 33 years, so many of you have legacy applications that would qualify for that statement, but have been fortunate to bring the logic forward of those applications, and many have a need for a refresh and the look and feel and the experience, the actual interaction. So that's something that we're looking forward to talking to you about today. You know about Magic, the company publicly traded on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol MGIC. All of our financial results are public information, including our 2015 revenues of $176 million. You may not realize that we have over 1,300 employees worldwide in some 24 offices around the world, and customers in more than 50 countries around the world, and over 3,500 global business partners serving literally millions of users worldwide of Magic applications. We are, as I said, very pleased to have you on today's webinar. If you have questions at any time, you can enter them into the question or chat box, and I will read them back to Paul at the conclusion of his formal presentation, and we hope that you do have some questions. Just type them in at any time, and we'll get to them there towards the end of that broadcast. So we do appreciate your participation in today's webinar, and we are going to this time turn it over to Paul. But before I do that, Paul has 2 titles. One of them is Big Boss Man, and the other one is Managing Partner. I don't know. You'll have to explain that to you. But Paul's considered, one of the top experts in UX. He's an application architect, just one of the leading people in the country and around the world. He's led some 500 software application design projects. He's began his user experience career at Apple, a company who's kind of known for being pretty cool with design. He's worked on a lot of media-rich learning environments for children while he was there, and his passion in medical and life sciences began while he was at Agilent, which is now HP Medical Products. Paul holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the University of Colorado and an MBA from Santa Clara University. So we're very excited again to have Paul here, and I'll just at this time hand control of the webinar over to Paul, and he will share his desktop with us so that we can see his presentation, and we're looking forward to what you have to share today, Paul. Take it away.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Glenn. Glenn, I'm going to rely on you to kind of give me a little feedback in terms of whether you can see things okay. Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, you just want to go into slideshow mode, and then we'll see it full screen.
Now, I'm in slideshow mode right now. Can you see it full screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So just a little bit of detail on Catalyst. Catalyst has not been around as long as Magic has. We've been around for about 23 years. we are very narrowly focused on designing and building user experiences for complex software, and it's really in about 4 different areas: the medical area, life science area, financial, and IoT and cloud solutions. And I was recently down at your conference, and a lot of the applications that you folks have been working on, we would characterize as complex pieces of software, and I think that the same approaches that we take will be relevant to what you're doing. We have, let me get my controls in front. We worked with a lot of different organizations. So there are, large organizations, medium-sized organizations, smaller venture-funded organizations, and the only thing about that was to say is that, we do understand that there's a real difference in terms of what people are able to accomplish in the user experience of their software if they have a very large organization like American Express, as opposed to if they have sort of an emerging organization. So what we want to talk about is this issue that you may be, and hopefully the reason why you're on this webinar is because you are at a point where you have an existing application, probably web-based, you're using the Magic platform, and you want to move it over to mobile. And there are a series of sort of missteps that people can make that we're really trying to avoid. And it would be perfectly fine if you said, well, you had 9 potential places where we would make mistakes, and we're not making any of those, okay? Or there might be 3 or 4 where you think, okay, I need to pay attention to those particular issues. So, pay attention to the ones that are relevant to you, then ignore the ones that aren't relevant to you. Most organizations have something similar to what I'm showing now. They have an existing desktop application. It may be thick client or it may be web-based. Okay? And then they decide that they're going to do a mobile implementation, and they might have something specific for tablet, something specific for phones. So in this case, this is a piece of software for delivering home healthcare services where people call on people who have just been released from the hospital for some fairly acute thing. Could have been a knee replacement, a hip replacement, could have been a heart attack, some cardiovascular procedure, and they need some level of home health care. So this organization, they had 3 separate versions, 3 separate code bases. And that's one of the key watchwords I'd say is that, number one, this issue of having separate code base, and in most cases it's separate development teams. That's one of the things we'd really like you to try to avoid. The other issue is that if you are a person who's delivering home health care to a patient in a home and they've had a heart attack, and you use your tablet down on the lower right, makes sense. And then when you go back to your office, if you look at a totally different user experience, it's very hard to pick up on your work and finish it up. And in a lot of pieces of software, yours might be the case. There's work that people might do in a mobile setting, and then they'll pick it up and continue it or wrap it up in a desktop. And that experience needs to be similar, and there needs to be continuity. Sometimes people will say they want it to be completely agnostic, device agnostic. I don't care which device I'm on. In a lot of cases, you're using the mobile to collect information in a mobile setting, and the desktop is where you kind of finish up working on that. The other thing that is a big factor that we're trying to help keep you out of is this idea that if you have different code bases and different platforms, more than likely the features are going to come out at different times. And it creates this awkward situation where your customers say, well, I saw that we were doing the 6.8 release, but you know what? The 6.8 release is only available on web, and it won't be available on tablet until the fall, and then smartphones not till Q1, so we're just going to hold tight on what we're on right now. And that's something we want you to avoid. So the ideal scenario is where you can have ideally one code base, which Magic allows you to do, when the experience is consistent across devices. And there is, when you release functionality, because it's in one code base, you release it in one code base, but you publish these other devices. And the devices may be native functionality, or in some cases it might be a hybrid implementation where all of the HTML and all the functionality that you're using in Magic, you put inside a hybrid wrapper to publish it that way. But the idea is that experience is the same. The release of the functionality comes out at the same time. It's a shared code and content base across devices. And what you're really looking toward, and this is a big part of the proposition with Magic, is that you're going to reduce your overall development time and shorten your time to market. Okay, now there are these 9 things that can happen. So I've got 9 different things to talk through, and I've got some examples to show you along the way. Okay. First one. So the first set of things are relate to users and customers. What users and customers want. Okay. Head in the cloud. You know, most people are saying they want to go to cloud, and I'm guessing almost all of you have already done that, where you've made that move to the cloud. Our input on that is, from a design experience, is that our recommendation is your design system is consistent across devices, and that you use the development environment that lets you do that, which Magic helps you do that, and you use consistent UI controls, which again you get in Magic. Any and all devices, user expect to be have device agnostic apps. That comes with a caveat. There are some of your applications where people would say, I want to do everything independent of a device. I'll give you an example. In your home banking application, you probably want to be able to transfer funds either on your web or your phone or your tablet at any time, okay? Or maybe pay a bill, something like that. And that's an example of an application that is fairly device agnostic. For a lot of the applications that you folks are doing, which are serious line of business applications, more than likely there is a mobile context setting where there's things that people want to have, and then there is something that is more of a desktop. What people want to be able to do is they want to be able to go to any device and do what's appropriate on that device. Okay, third thing. We are now really living in a world that if you're embarking on a new user experience design and you're saying, I think I need to move my applications over to being mobile and responsive, they really do need to be responsive. Any new development needs to be responsive. And the reason is that, you know, for a long time we all lived in a standard resolution, a 1024 by 768, and then it kind of went up from there. There was a point in time, it was 600 by 400 pixels. Now, with the devices, even if you just looked at desktop resolution, the devices, or the resolution of the monitors, it just varies too much. There's too much variability. So the way you need to address that is you just need to have it be responsive. And we'll show you some examples of that. But I do want to say that you need to assume that that's a requirement now, and one key caveat on that is you really can't redo that responsiveness. You can't retrofit for it. It's a piece of functionality that's very, very difficult. You need to be able to attack that in the beginning. Okay, so let me show you an example. So just as an example of an application, here's an application it's used for managing you know, all the systems on very nice yachts, and on very nice yachts have a lot of systems and a lot of complexity. So there was a web implementation, and they wanted to move it to mobile. Okay, so here was the implementation. Couple things about it. Now, one is you could see the experience is consistent. You know, if they went in, if they were sitting in their very large home, getting ready to take a trip on this very large yacht, they'd be sitting at our desktop in a very nice study. When they're out on the boat, they'd probably use a tablet. But because they've got that very nice boat, it's not going to take long before they are way offshore. They're certainly not going to have out of cellular access. certainly won't have Wi-Fi, so all the functionality needed to be on this. So, and same way with their smartphone. When they went, if they were sailing down at in the British Virgin Islands, and they went to the marina at the Bitter End Yacht Club, they would take their smartphone ashore to say, okay, there are things I want to get to reprovision our boat. Now, you've got the same experience. In one case, it's a web version. In the other case, it's native. Okay, and you need to think through those issues. But issues in terms of, can I have it be all web-based content that gets published in a hybrid wrapper, or do I have a reason why I want to have it be a web-based concept and then native implementations? The Magic platform will let you, will certainly support having it being web-based content and then having it be native implementations. Okay. Now, and let me comment on this native implementation issue. There are really two approaches to this. One is where you say, I have all my content is HTML-based, JavaScript, cascading style sheets. That's all the content. And one implementation is you say, I'm going to put that, take all that web content and publish it on the web, which we all know. And on the devices, you basically drop it in a hybrid container that gives you access to some of the functionality on that device. Okay? And as you build with Magic, it accomplishes that for you, where you get that native device access. Okay? Now, there are some situations where you absolutely need to take significant advantage of the native functionality. So, in other words, if you are designing a piece of software that manages drones, and I'm guessing that none of you are, but on that device there is very detailed, real-time, complex calculations that are taking place. You can't afford to go back across into the cloud, and you might lose your cloud connection. Then that's a reason why you say categorically it has got to be a native application. So there are two paths, and you'd have to work them out and look at those. And our implementation is, what's nice about the Magic platform is it lets you publish those native applications as well as the web at the same time. So it gives you some flexibility. Okay, set of issues that are around design and specification. So on this issue of designing for responsive, you used to have to design for your UI on one screen, and then in this responsive you have this other dimension, which is, well, what if they have different varying resolutions? So it's another dimension you have to deal with. And to be honest, designing for responsive work is actually very difficult. It takes really experienced people who really figured out how to design. Now, Catalyst's approach on this is we take a screen, we break it up into panels, and we design those panels to be responsive. But it's tough. And it's tough to have everybody in your organization do it. It's a difficult thing to do. So you really want to get some expertise in terms of doing that responsiveness. Another part of it is, in your organization, one of the complications, if you've got multiple applications in your organization that you need to update, and you've got multiple people doing UX design, that creates challenges. And the way to address that is to try to have a design system that comes out of when you have moved an application to being mobile. So you use the Magic platform, you take one of your applications, you make that translation so it's responsive, and you do the mobile implementation, and you say, okay, we've learned some things about the design of that, and you use a design system, use that to derive a design system for your other apps. Another thing that we're trying to be careful of, and the Magic really lightens the load on this. Our recommendation is that when you think of moving to mobile, you don't think, oh no, I need to design for I need to design for Android, I need to design for iOS, I've got to take advantage of those operating system nuances. Our recommendation is that you don't do that. It's not a situation like we were, those of us that are, were kind of have been in this industry for a long time. Remember, there was a time when you would walk into a store and there would be boxes of software, and you turn on the side and it would say for Mac or Windows. You had two platforms, and the Mac version looked entirely different from the Windows version, and you had to make sure that they all worked to the nuances of that operating system. Our recommendation now is that you don't have to do that, and you can mostly design around the business process. So if you have an application that's doing quote to cash, that you design around that process, and that's how you organize the views, not around standard conventions that you might have on Android and standard conventions on iOS. So in other words, you present the business process the same whether it's in iOS or Android, okay, regardless of the way what device people are going to access it on. Okay, now let me just comment on this responsiveness, and this is something that will hopefully help you. So when Catalyst thinks of UI design and think of responsive behavior, we like to unpack the problem. And the way we unpack the problem is we break a screen up into reusable, modular, responsive, and adaptive panels. Okay, so you can see here that on this I have a global navigation panel. I have a data center selector. This is for a piece of software that's used to manage data centers. The most interesting thing about all this collection of data centers is their energy bill last year was about 2.5 billion, which I always find mind-boggling. So it's a serious piece of software for managing these dedicated, high availability, high security data centers. So we broke the UI up into reusable panels. So there was a global navigation panel, there was the ability to select a data center, there was a product strip, and then there was, there were other things. Now you could see, if you look at this global navigation, what happened is when we designed for it being on desktop, then we designed for it all the way down to smartphone. And you could see that it, in this case, it adapts. And what I mean by adapt, it actually changes when it gets down to a certain size, and that's that adaptive behavior. Okay, and it's one code base, it's one reusable panel. Use the same code everywhere else in the software. Now, when you get down to this product selector here, you can see the product selector has an icon and some verbiage, and then when it collapses down to a phone, well, you still see select product, but you just see the icons, you don't see the labels. So there are two things I want to mention. One is that is an example of this responsive behavior. You're basically resizing it. You're not fundamentally changing the UI like we did up here. You're adjusting it so in this case the labels, the verbiage doesn't show up. Another aspect of that is that and for example, if you looked at this data center selector, where you see it says inventory selected data center, you select it, and then you see this sort of slide carousel. Well, when you see it over here, it responds to this smartphone size. You still see the data center selector, and your carousel selector of data centers is just, there are fewer data centers that show up in that. So it's just gotten responded to that device size. So the reason why I wanted to mention it is that we have found that unpacking the responsive problem by looking at your software as reusable panels helps a lot. Helps in the design and it helps in the development. The other thing I want to mention is that probably the most valuable thing that you can do when you make this move from your desktop software over to mobile is to think simplify. To really, really make it a priority to try to simplify your software. If it's on if there's something on a screen that you don't need it, take it away. And my philosophy is I use this principle of this. A large hardware store I saw when I used to live in Boulder, Colorado, and their motto at McGuckin's hardware store is, if we don't have it, you don't need it. And that's really what you want your software on. When you redesign it to be for mobile, if you should have only the controls that are necessary, and if a control isn't there, then people don't need it. Okay, let's move on. Development. So, and this is where the Magic platform really helps you a lot. So, first off, you are trying to deliver a piece of software, and if you do it in multiple technologies, multiple development platforms, just the idea, it's kind of like taking 3 different routes on vacation. Maybe you'll get there at the same time, maybe you won't get there at the same time. The value of using the Magic platform is you are using one technology base, and you're using that to accomplish your other builds. And I will tell you that this issue of getting a consistent experience but having different technologies just doesn't work very well. The other issue of synchronizing your releases. It's very hard to synchronize releases on different code bases. In general, if you've got different code bases and different development teams, it's just not realistic to keep them in sync, aside from the fact that it's very expensive. Magic lets you have one code base, one development platform, and we would really encourage you as much as possible that when you make those releases, that you release them both across your desktop versions and your mobile. Just this area that you're dealing with when you move to mobile it's another one of these dimensions you're looking at. All of a sudden you've got responsive and mobile. You've got one dimension that says, oh my gosh, what size are all the screens? And that's one complexity. And then you've got another one, which are what are all the devices? And it's painful. It's hard to keep track of. And that's another reason why using the Magic platform helps you with that, because it gives you one platform to work on. You're going to have one development team, preferably. If you have multiple applications, probably have multiple development teams. But that whole issue of having multiple different things, it's not a happy ending in most cases. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple more things, and then we'll open it up to questions. And I specifically left this fairly short because I'd like you folks to be able to ask questions about the things that are relevant for you. Okay, so here's an example. This is an example. It's a piece of software. It's used to detect gunshots in high crime areas. Okay, and it's an older piece of software. It was a web-based. And police would use it to get notification of a gunshot and then send them to it. And then the goal for this was to have it be one code base, one design. This is what it looked like, and this is what the final design ended up being. So what you're looking at is absolutely one code base. In this case, it happens to be all HTML and JavaScript that's responsive, and it's published in a hybrid container. Okay. In your case, if you were doing it with Magic, you'd have one code base, but you would then decide you'd publish them as native devices. But the important thing is you have one code base that you're working from. Now, another key thing about this, if you, as you can see here, the user experience itself, the quality of the experience when you are going to make this effort to move over to mobile can be very profound. It's a good time to say, hey, we're going to make this move. Let's do something that will really be compelling. And a lot of times what is happening is that when people decide we need to move to mobile, what they're really dealing with is their piece of software is kind of at the end of life. I mean, like you're looking at this piece of software, it's pretty tired. And it doesn't look like a modern piece of software. And what people think is, geez, I wonder what the back end's like. I mean, am I really going to find out where the gunshots are? So I would encourage you that if you make this move to being mobile and responsive, you think through, okay, we're going to use this as an opportunity to really refine the design. Okay, Now, so those were all of my comments that I wanted to make, and I wanted to open it up for questions. Let me comment on, there are some resources that we've got up online that you can have access to. There's three articles. One is on this whole issue of this Bermuda Triangle, places we want to keep you away from, the routes we want to make sure that you don't end up on. The other one is a set of 25 mobile and responsive design tips. It's just good things to think of. You're not going to have 25 of them that make sense for you, but it's a good place to start. The other part of it is that on a UI technology checklist, those of you on this call, you may very well have full stack responsibility. You've got access, you've got responsibility for infrastructure, the database, the service layer, business logic. This UI thing is one, it's just one piece of what you're trying to, one part of the dragon you're trying to slay. And the complication on UI is not that the technology is so complicated, but is that you have many, many different technologies. You have HTML, you have CSS, you have JavaScript, you have some hybrid wrappers and stuff, and there's a lot of little pieces to keep track of. This is a checklist. So let me do this for right now. Glenn, how about if I stop right here and we open it up for some questions?
Okay, great, Paul. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And so as people are entering their questions, we'll read them back out to you. First of all, Paul, we wanted to see if it was okay with you. Bert Goodwin's asking a question, are you going to send out a recording of this? We have been recording. You mind if we share this on the Magic website for people to look at later on?
No, that's fine. What I'd like to do is there's some one more thing I want to show you that I would not like to not have shared publicly. So let me, I'll tell you when we go into that. If you could stop the recording, that'd be great.
Okay, sure, absolutely, we'll do that. Great. Daniel has a question. He said the second and third links are the same URL. Looks like.
We will correct that. We will correct that for you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Daniel.
Good point.
Somebody's asking, do you recommend wireframing?
Yes, we do recommend wireframing. We recommend wireframing to clarify the functionality. We also, what I'm also very clearly saying is we absolutely recommend doing the work on paper first, especially on this responsive, especially mobile. So you do it on paper in wireframes, and the good news about it, you throw that paper in the trash, code. Okay, and then at some point you move from wireframes to actual design specification, like what I'm showing you here. This is the actual design specification, whereas prior to that it would be in black and white. We're not concerned about the wording. It's kind of just clarifies the functionality.
Okay, great. Someone asked, how would you respond to a CEO who says we need to go mobile first?
Okay, it's a good question. If you have an application that is primarily used for mobile, let me give you an example. We designed some software that was used by Comcast in the field, primarily for their field technicians when they did work orders. It was a mobile-first application. Okay, it's perfectly reasonable to say my primary usage scenario is in a mobile setting. And you do that mobile setting, you define that functionality, then when you have that, the web version, more than likely what you're looking at is there's a different set of activities and functionality that needs to be created on web, and you just do that as the second stage. So what I would say, if the CEO said, I want to do mobile first, I would be saying, as long as the primary context for the usage is mobile first, great. Then it makes all the sense to do that. Just as I mentioned, if the context is not mobile first, if people are still using desktop and web, our sense would be to start with the desktop and then adjust it down to mobile, it's kind of easier to think from the larger to the smaller than going from smaller to larger. It just happens to be that way.
Paul, I have a question. If one of our customers is going to be working with your firm as a UX consultant, I mean, I assume that most of that consulting is front-loaded towards the beginning of the project. Is that right, or do you stay a part of the project all the way through? How does that work?
Okay. Our approach on user experience and when we're doing a user experience on an application, we love to have the UI help really inform the development. In other words, we do the wireframes, we do the screens design specifications. You might get to something like that, what you're looking at now. We would, and as you're going along there, at the point where we start coding this view, in a lot of cases, Catalyst actually codes the UI and hands it over. Or you might be doing the coding of the UI inside. At this point, when you see a screen like this, you can say, I know what the functionality is, so you know what the back-end services are, what the business logic needs to be, and you know what the UI is. So the two can be tracked in parallel. Then at some point, you get, our preference is to code the UI, get the UI defined, and the back-end services defined, and then you make a very deliberate step to integrate them together. And typically, we would recommend that the UI folks are around until you have completed that integration of the UI to the back end. But in a lot of cases, it's just for minor support. So you kind of, the UI is typically front-loaded on a project, and our approach is to have a particular sense of urgency about getting things to the point where your back-end development team could start saying, oh, I know what services I need to write to. And by the way, what happens is the reason why you like to have the UI sort of lead the development on a mobile implementation is, if you look at this screen here, this data center selector, this panel, which you know it's going to be responsive, it's available on desktop and web, there is probably a very specific service that interfaces to this. And in most cases on these reusable, responsive, adaptive panels, there is a service that matches up to it, and it makes sense to be able to think of the services corresponding to the specific panels.
All right. And what's the best way to get a proposal in the beginning, Paul? I mean, when people are trying to scope this so that you can give them a sense of how much effort it's going to require on your part, do you need to see their existing applications and have a sense of what mobile apps they're creating? You know, how far along do they need to be in order for you to be able to give them a good number?
Okay, it's a good question. Where you really, if you have an existing application, which I think it is in most cases, the best way to deal with it is to have a conversation where, with anybody there you're talking about, whether it was Catalyst or some other firm, have a conversation to take a look at what your application is now and to talk about where you think you need to move it to. Is it going to move to being just tablet accessible because that's what people may be using in a retail setting, or do you need it to smartphone? And typically after taking a look at what you have now and discussing what the new functionality is, then it's pretty easy to do a work plan that gives you a sense of how to approach that.
All right. Very good. I don't see any other questions coming in here at the moment, so I want to again thank everyone for participating in our webinar, for attending, and especially to you, Paul, for your generous sharing of your time. And we would encourage everyone to contact Paul, to contact Magic if you've got a Magic project in mind that you want to use Paul on, or contact him directly. That's fine with us too. We're working together on this, so we do really appreciate that. Any final comments? You said you had something you wanted to share off recording. Is that right?
There are two things I'd like to do. One is I'd like to say that you can reach out to Catalyst. CallusUX.com is the website. Paul at CallusUX.com is a way to reach me. You can also reach back to Magic. It's a good point that what we want to really do is to support your efforts working on the Magic platform. That's a very specific thing. So it may be some of the people in Glenn's organization or Cheryl who is more involved with the field activity, and we would absolutely like to collaborate on that. And there's one more thing I want to show you that's for the people that are just on this call. So Glenn, you might want to pause your recording now.
All right, so I want to thank and say goodbye to those that are watching the recording. Visit us again at a Magic webinar soon, and Paul's going to continue with some secrets after this.